Welcome to the absolute finale of this insane Hell Trio journey. This is a story of how I managed to execute possibly the hardest challenge in gaming I have ever done. To say 7B is a step up in difficulty is an understatement. Needless to say, this chapter, despite having the most difficult gameplay of all B-sides, also had a considerably longer time span. Since I started learning this abomination, almost 2 months had passed, and while I didn't play it every single day, it's been on my mind the entire way through. This is the only time I'll split this video into 3 parts instead of 2, because grinding this chapter from zero deserves its own appreciation in this story. This chapter, while considered by many to be 1.5 or 2 times harder than 8B, took me on the contrary to 8B not 1 but 7 full-length sessions of only grinding from zero. As you've seen in my previous video, my first ever run after 3 years took me 33 minutes, and it made me extremely hopeless of what I'm about to conquer. Let's begin explaining. Similarly to 7A, this chapter consists of 7 sub-chapters, or checkpoints for that matter, each representing one section of the mountain. Obviously there was no actual checkpoint, I had to beat the whole chapter without dying a single time. The 0 meters checkpoint throws you right into some of the most precise and brutal timings this vanilla game has to offer. Since this section was at the very beginning, it didn't provide any noticeable threat, but for my own sanity, I did end up utilizing the crouch dash mechanic for some tight corridors. Again, while it does make the timings considerably easier, the game allows it as a fair mechanic. The 500-meter checkpoint used to be a huge mind block for me at the very beginning of the golden grind. It felt absolutely hopeless because the rooms themselves aren't very difficult, which made every death twice as punishing. On the contrary to the rest of the sub-chapter, room 2 was the only difficult one. Since I always play the podcast or music in my headphones to survive the mental challenge of 7B, this single room was likely the only one where it played a major role. You have to jump left while the traffic block is activated 3 times, which without the audio beep cue was very difficult to execute, and served a major part in my dying experience, especially in the first half of my golden grind. 1000 meters was likely the easiest checkpoint of the whole chapter, so I'm going to skim through this quickly. This single click was very precise since you had to jump away from this dream block, hoping that your initial placement on it was correct enough to not accidentally bump straight into spikes. This room required a lot of very quick reflex corrections, but nothing too bad. 1500 meters was likely the hardest part to learn, especially because of cycles. I used a similar tactic as I did in 8B, where I fixated on a single dust bunny and progressed through the room after it reached a certain point. It took me a very long time to figure out, but also became likely the most consistent checkpoint later on. 2000 meters on the other hand was the most inconsistent checkpoint and the easiest to learn initially. I did die a considerable amount of times due to the inconsistent nature of it, guess why, but it serves as a middle ground in this chapter's difficulty. 2500 meters was interesting, since it consisted of 3 decently easy rooms, but one which was likely the hardest room in this entire chapter and ended up costing me the most amount of unsuccessful attempts in the second half. This one single release was absolutely horrendous, because you might think this gap provides a similar sense of difficulty as every other gap in this room, but since the next fall is entirely last click dependent, you have to release in the top half of this gap to correct yourself in time. All that while releasing from a red bubble, which makes your movement way faster, so to keep it short, this gap is way tighter than it looks, and there's no visual cue unless you look at 3 different places in the span of a few frames. And then we get to the summit. My heartbeat spikes, and I know this could be the final attempt. Summit is super hard. It's likely self-explanatory considering the fact it's the longest checkpoint. I think the flags themselves are fairly comparable to 7A, since 7A Summit was way harder than anything else, but still I don't want to underestimate the difficulty of some flags, only because most of them are chill. My tactic for Summit was utilizing wave dashes to skip various hard inputs. Right at the very beginning in flag 19, I wave dash to this block to save my 2 dashes and skip the other 2 blocks ahead. I've also used the wave dash in flag 17, or a hyper, I don't know what is this one called, simply to have a couple more frames to correct my position and land on this tiny block safely. Flag 13 is very infamous, and I understand why. It looks agonizing, but I practiced a shit ton before trying from zero and actually got fairly consistent with it along the way. You have to land on the right side of this cloud, maneuver a 180 between these spinners, and at the very bottom dash up left to land in the middle of this block, on which you have to start holding left to gain momentum and jump at the very edge, timed with the cloud momentum, to position yourself in the left half of this corridor, and then after falling below the level of the spinners, dash upright to barely miss the ceiling spinners. Keep in mind, this set of inputs happens after 8 minutes of gameplay. It sounds hard, is hard, but having this setup memorized in your muscles makes it way more consistent than a lot of players think. Flag 9 is likely the scariest. I found this clutch method where if you don't jump high enough and use both of your dashes mid-air, you can barely catch the cloud respawning and gain a chance to try again. If the hopelessness of waiting for the cloud to reappear wasn't scary enough, Madeline inevitably uses all of her stamina in the second half of this flag, which makes the last pillar slippery. With the stress accumulated over an already 9 minutes long run, I panicked 2 times and died in this very spot. After that, there is a point to catch a breather, and it's the wall bounce section. Wall bounces are hard to learn, I admit, but since it was a new mechanic in this chapter, it required very lenient skill to pass. And I already mastered my wall bounces in other chapters. In flag 3, I performed likely the most known skip in Summit. I wave dashed above this wall bounce, and I think everyone who is good enough to Golden 7B does it this way. In flag 2, I used another wave dash to make the next inputs easier with 2 dashes available, and we're in a final stretch. Flag 2 is not hard but horrible on your nerves. I was shivering when I entered this section, but barely survived. Barely. It is nothing hard after all, but you have to memorize which clouds you can jump off of, you have to constantly be close to the floor spike so you don't accidentally dash too high, and at the very end, position yourself in the left half of this corridor to time the wall bounce properly. And you're done! Flag 1 and cassette room were the rooms I pretty much never died on while practicing. And after all this, it's finally time to do the entire thing deathless. And that's when the 7B chapter absolutely humbled me. After multiple sessions of intense learning and getting comfortable with every room, my delusional self was thinking that I was able to beat 6B and 8B in one from 0 session, then I could at least get to the summit once in the first session. And I was far from it. Not far from beating the level, just far from reaching even like the summit section. My only good attempts both failed to 2000 meters. I was hopeless. My second session uncovered my favorite room of all time. With this session, I was determined that I'll get to summit whatever it takes and gave it my everything. And in this moment, the hardest realization mentally hit me that this would be a lot harder than I imagined. When I didn't even get to summit once in this 2 hours 15 minutes long session either, more than 3 hours in. In this time I would have beaten 6B and 8B Golden combined, and I couldn't even get a grasp of hope with this chapter. The very next day though, the grasp arrived. Three consecutive attempts passed the 2000 meter checkpoint and I was ready to tackle the summit. All 3 attempts died to my absolute nerve breakdown, and for me it just further emphasized the sheer mental difficulty of this challenge. It took me a week to finally gain the confidence to continue, and I was ready to reach 1200 meters again. Here I was very hopeless after my failed momentum timing, but proceeded to perform the coolest clutch ever. Of course, I then died to my favorite room of all time. 1 hour later, I had another chance at summit.
No, I don't know.
I was surprisingly finding hope from thin air because I realized I've reached summit 3 times in 2 consecutive sessions. My both mental and physical skill concluded that I should be able to get to summit every day, which made me open Celeste the very next day. First, I suffered the arguably dumbest death in the second half.
Čož, som držal dole.
But only few minutes later, I was back again in summit. I tied my PB by dying to the exact same pillar.
Do piči! Ježiš, to je strašný stres, preboha.
And this isn't even a hard obstacle, it's easily passable with a clear mind, but I was shitting bricks, even after 3 times getting to summit before. Never mind, on the next day I was ready again. My very first attempt died to my favorite room of all time, but this time it's justifiable, because the fuck was this clutch? I should have died here anyway. 6 minutes later I died to 2000 meters, and while I haven't been showing 2000 meter deaths in a long time, you have to see this one. I want VAR check because the fuck you mean this didn't count? My next attempt to 2500 meters ended in a room which I expected to die in at one point, since I've had a really jank strategy for it. I actually relearned it later because thank god. One attempt later and I'm back in summit. This time finally dying to a flag which most consider the hardest / coin toss / RNG.
Come on, coin toss. I won the coin toss, baby.
This was absolutely expected, but I was scared I would get mind blocked or stuck, which I luckily didn't. Back to summit again? Not yet, because my favorite room of all time wanted one more sacrifice.
Do piči, už.
But back in summit, dying to me accidentally dashing upright, and it got me too scared to correct myself. Now, after session 6, I was in a horrible position. Exams were coming up, I was leaving for a trip to Eurovision, and I had time until 28 May to complete 7B, because then I won't be home for 3 months, risking losing absolutely all consistency and starting back from the beginning. While I didn't want to resort to this solution, my other priorities made me have the next 7B session on, guess when? 28th of May, obviously. So I decided to do the same thing I usually do. YouTube stream, which I won't stop until I finish something. So I gave 7B the freedom to take however long it wants, because I was ready to stream for 10 hours easily. Even though I haven't played 7B in 2 weeks, I was insane. 35 minutes into the stream, I finished my first golden attempt, dying in the last room of 3000s.
To bol... pas prosto, dobre.
Next attempt also died at 2000s. I told myself if I died at Golden Ridge part again, I'm going back to practice, and of course I died to it again. Now this death showed me that 2 weeks without 7B made a tiny dent into my muscle memory, because I forgot I'm usually dashing twice here. Now I want you to remember that not only 3 consecutive attempts got to the halfway point, but also my first 3 at the same time. I took a while to practice and accidentally got my 3rd ever no death summit without even really trying.
Let's go! Môj druhý Deathless Summit. OK, super, super, super. Myslím, že toto je sign, že máme šancu dneska to.
I hoped back to start with my 4th ever attempt this stream, dying at 2500 meters, and we don't talk about this death. I'm shocked this bullshit happened twice. And then on attempt 5...
Poď! New best, nový rekord, new best, new best.
I beat 7B. I'm in utter disbelief that my consistency absolutely skyrocketed out of nowhere after literally ditching this challenge for 2 weeks, but after only 1 hour of streaming, enjoy my completion of 7B.
No, dobrý. Môžete ísť domov. To čo bolo do piče? No, chodźmy już. Chodź. Prosím, už. Summit entry. Poďme, idem to prejsť. Chodź. Chodź. Chodź! New best, nowy rekord, new best, new best. Čau, počkaj, sekunda. Idem to prejsť. Piče, 171 tep, posledná rumka. Idem na to. Yes! Ty kokos! Do piči, ani hodinu streamujem, pre boha! Dobre, super. Vybavené. Ďakujem. MPS Devil, ďakujem Dory. Neviem ešte kto iný tu je, 5 vás tu je. Thank you so much. That's crazy, that was so quick. I'm streaming for 1 hour. I can probably edit the video today and upload it today. $201 strawberries. Znamení sem prišla a končíš, no presne tak. A však ty si tu už bola, toto, alebo nejaká tvoja kamoška, toto neznášim kupčeka, je to Minja, však to úplne písalo jak ty, tak sa netvár. Si tu už bola. Wait, I'll show you guys the strawberry. Je šíleně náhodne najít tvůj stream na výhernom kole. Tomu ver! Ja som tak nečakal, že to prejdem tak rýchlo. Ja som teď prišla ze školky, ja tak neviem kto to bol, ale tak, neviem, bolo to po česky, čo ja viem. I'm still at 144 heart rate. It's been like 2 minutes.
Now you may ask what's next. One of my 6 goals of 2026 was to beat 6, 7 and 8 beat Deathless, and while I know there's one more golden I have to obtain to max out Celeste, I'm unfortunately not doing it this year. I am very certain I'll golden farewell one day, since I love the chapter, but I have to relax from this journey for at least a year. I am definitely considering speedrunning any percent, trying out other games or getting back to GD, but most importantly, I want to get into modded Celeste, especially Strawberry Gem. I explicitly told myself to never skip ahead to mods before having 201 strawberries, and right now when I'm finally done, I'm more than excited to finally start doing things in gaming, which won't put me under so much stress. 178 heart rate is insane in my standards. For all the 3 people watching, thank you so much for sticking around on this journey, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!